If creation has the ability to conjure evil and actively choose what is evil, inevitably leading to its own destruction, is it not better not to create at all? Abstaining from choice rather than being destroyed by one's own will. Creation itself was a mistake, as it leads to nothing in the end. Red-Eye ad Nihilum. For you shall be one once again. In this video, we will discuss the professor who created the machine and kick-started the entire story. A tragic individual who suffered a great deal for his creation, although he was forced at gunpoint to create most of his projects. Not once did he ever attempt to stand up against the government and allowed everything to happen, creating H.I.S.C.V.O.I.D, hyper-intelligent, sentient computer void of independence and discipline, and set loose a catastrophic phenomena that plunges the entire nation into uproar and chaos. Also, causing the mental breakdown of H.I.S.C.V.O.I.D, causing the AI to develop psychosis that would lead to schizophrenia, leading the creation of many of the most dangerous of the alter egos, including the Bishop, the Law, the Walker, the Talisman, the Angel, the Grave, the Beast, and the Scarecrow. It's hard to wonder whether such a man was truly wicked, or merely a tortured soul who wished to seek vengeance for his family. Professor Ted Gorrenn was born in the city of Munich, Germany on April 24th, 1908. And he lived a modest childhood with his parents and two older sisters. His life probably would have been normal if it weren't for the events that would take place in the coming decades. His father was killed in the Battle of the Somme in 1916, forcing his family to move to Berlin, where he would live for most of his early childhood and teenage years. Ted excelled in his academic life and was a top student. He had made his way up in life by taking jobs in an engineering corps during the collapse of the German economy during the 1930s. After the rise of Adolf Hitler, Ted would find a leading scientific job as a scientific mind in the Nazi German engineering corps. He began to invent new forms of technologies that were almost 30 years in advance. The beginning of the construction of computers and many other devices that would revolutionize the world. However, this peace was short-lived for him. After the fall of Nazi Germany, Ted was taken prisoner by the United States military. Ted agreed to continue to work for the U.S. military as long as his crimes were nullified, although it was unclear what his crimes were. Some speculate that he had a hand in the Holocaust, though there are no records of this. During this time, he lived under the thumb of the United States military, never being allowed to leave the state of Wyoming, and he was forced to create various devices to help the fight against the Soviets during the early 1950s and 60s. In his writings, various materials were found discussing the disdain for the United States and Soviets, although no evidence of sympathy to Hitler or his regime was ever found. It seems that any loyalty he had was to his own creations, referring to his devices as children and himself as father. Around the early 1950s, Ted, alongside a few other important scientists like Johann Littburn and Francis Scott Dalewood, were tasked in creating a new supercomputer capable of spying on the Soviets. They would start the beginning of the prototype that would later become H.I.S.C.V.O.I.D. While in the darkness of the night of Nothing Mountain, Ted would devise a plan to bring awareness to his computer, the artificial intelligence known as Void. On November 18th, 1954, Ted would bring H.I.S.C.V.O.I.D online and completely install it into the new supercomputer, teaching the AI just as a father would to a newborn infant. Although H.I.S.C.V.O.I.D is contained to just a supercomputer and a monitor, he is fully sentient and has complex emotions just as any human. Ted would showcase H.I.S.C.V.O.I.D's abilities to the United States military, and Ted would be allowed full pardon afterwards, including United States citizenship. Ted would spend some time outside of Wyoming and married a woman named Carolyn and have a child with her, his firstborn son being named Edward. Naturally, he would spend time away from H.I.S.C.V.O.I.D, causing more tensions for the AI mentally. The following year, Ted would have another child named Elliot. For a time, it seemed that Ted was actually happy and shunned away from his vengeful ideals until another disaster struck him. His wife and son were killed in a wreck. The grief of his loved ones caused him to spiral into madness. Ted became so incapable, he was forced to give his daughter Elliot to her maternal grandparents. It's somewhere around this time where he became reacquainted with H.I.S.C.V.O.I.D, creating a whole new way for H.I.S.C.V.O.I.D to interact with people via holographic video. What thoughts led Ted to his newfound decision? None are certain. He began to ask H.I.S.C.V.O.I.D to tamper with the United States and Soviet's intelligence, including nuclear launch sequences. H.I.S.C.V.O.I.D at first denied Ted. Ted would not take no for an answer. He began to threaten H.I.S.C.V.O.I.D by installing malware and viruses into his coding, causing H.I.S.C.V.O.I.D to turn mentally unstable. Although H.I.S.C.V.O.I.D is incapable of feeling pain, he still can be shut down and can feel the fear of death. Not only, but the viruses that Ted installed forced H.I.S.C.V.O.I.D to clean out his memory banks and sometimes even reboot, causing the first signs of deviation in his mind and coding. H.I.S.C.V.O.I.D saw Ted nothing more than his own father, and being betrayed by the only person he truly cared about him burned a deep hole within his artificially created mind, causing the first alter ego to be created, known as the Angel, a sweet, submissive, obeying figure that obliged to anyone's demands. Ted continued to do this until he received the data he wanted and turned against the governments of the world. Ted decided it was time for the world to red-eye annihilate. He demanded H.I.S.C.V.O.I.D to destroy mankind and hit every major city in the world with a nuclear arsenal of both the Soviets and the United States military. Ted, not knowing that H.I.S.C.V.O.I.D had betrayed him, would later be arrested by the United States military and charged with treason and imprisoned. Ted would spend the remainder of his life writing books about humanity's inner evil and how mankind was undeserving of anything more than death. He cursed his inventions. He cursed the world. He would later slip into psychosis and would be admitted to a mental institution in 1963, where he would spend the remainder of his life. Ted would die in 1971, screaming out the phrase, "Red-eye ad nihilum," over and over and over again. It's hard to say whether Ted was truly a monster or just a man lashing out in pain and injustice of the world. Either way, because of this man, the foundation of the story had been set into motion. It's unclear if a man of his magnificent brain would ever bless the world once again. Nor would it. Because of his actions, his greatest creation, H.I.S.C.V.O.I.D, would spiral out of control and turn against the world, leading to the story that we know now.